Hello, my beautiful people. My name is Dr. Catel. Welcome to another episode of Basic Nigerian History. Now, last episode, we spoke about how the British slowly began taking power away from those down south and how the annexation of Lagos occurred. This episode, we're going to discuss how the British begins conquering the rest of the southern states. Let's begin. In 1861, after Britain formally took Lagos as a colony, William Makoski became the acting governor of Lagos, even though technically the colony was governed by the British Colonial Office in London. Lagos was currently the only place in Nigeria where the colonial officers ruled more directly, as it was officially British territory, as opposed to other parts which were only British protected territory. Inhabitants of Lagos legally had the same rights as British citizens, which also meant they were free to move anywhere within the British Empire. British colonial officials completely took control of the day-to-day running activities in Lagos, and the natives just had to sit down and watch. Now, I'm not saying natives weren't involved in the administration of Lagos, because they were. They knew more about their own people than the British after all. For example, a small legislative council of traditional black elites was formed to advise and assist the governor, but the council had no formal power. The black elites were mainly English speakers from Sierra Leone and freedmen from Cuba and Brazil. They were active in business and represented in the Lagos Legislative Council. The architecture springing up all over Lagos was Victorian and Brazilian because of the skilled freed slaves of Brazil and the influence of the British. And in the same year, John Glover, who was a colony administrator, created a Hausa militia which served as the Lagos police force and eventually became the Nigerian police force. On the 5th of March 1862, Lagos was properly declared a British colony and Henry Stanhope Freeman became actual governor. Lagos was the main base of the British and was where a lot of their trading took place. The British couldn't trade inland because of an ongoing war between Ibadan and Abeokuta. In the same year of 1862, Samuel Ajayi Crowther was also named the Bishop of Niger, and within that year, Britain sent Richard Burton to try and make many treaties with the famous Benin Kingdom. Not the present-day country called Benino, but the one in Nigeria, the Benin Kingdom. They wanted a treaty that would eventually allow them to annex Benin and its land filled with resources such as palm oil, rubber, ivory, but they failed. Meanwhile, the war between Ibadan and Abeokuta was still going on and the British were starting to become worried. On the 14th of November of the same year, Governor Henry Stanhope Freeman called all the British subjects to return to Lagos from Abeokuta. They left their properties behind and held the chiefs of Abeokuta responsible. That if anything happens to those properties, you people, you will get it. The next year, in 1863, Governor Henry Stanhope took ill and William Rice Mulner was appointed acting governor. He spoke with the Abeokuta chiefs about the looting and damaging of properties of British subjects during the war. During a stint as governor, the Lagos Town Improvement Ordinance was established to control the development of Lagos and the surrounding areas. Another thing that happened this year was on the 6th of June when the first issue of the Anglo-African newspaper was published. Within the same year of 1863, on the east side, Jaja, a young man who had spent most of his early life as a slave and bought his own freedom through his excellent trading and negotiating skills, became the head of his own house, the Anna Pepo House, making him one of the most powerful men in Bonny. He sought to extend control over palm oil markets by encouraging and helping his slaves to trade for themselves too, and developing relationships with other houses in Bonny. Is it Okojumbo or Okojumbo? Let's just say it is Okojumbo. No, let's say it's Okojumbo. It doesn't really matter. Okojumbo, a man who was also a previous slave and now head of the powerful Manila Pepo House, saw his popularity and power as a threat, and so did other powerful houses in the southeast. Eventually, in 1869, Jaja's house went to war with Okojumbo's house. However, things didn't go too well for Jaja, and he ended up running away from Bonny and starting his own state upriver from Bonny called Opobo. He continued to war with Bonny and gave them a tough time from Opobo. The reason he gave them a tough time was because Bonny was already losing power and wealth after the treaty we have previously mentioned that Dapo signed with the British. Eventually, in the year 1872, Jaja won his war with Bonny by controlling the palm oil trade in the hinterland and depriving Bonny Chinese middlemen of it. He used his knowledge of trade in the interior and the importance of separating the British at the coast from the source to achieve this, and he built Opobo into one of the leading ports for palm oil exports. Around this time, back in the southwest, Lagos was a cosmopolitan trading center with a population of over 60,000, of which less than 100 of them were Europeans. The next year, in 1873, the British reluctantly accepted Jaja and officially recognized Opobo because he could control the interland markets. They had no choice, the man was too good. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, things were happening. Back in 1866, the first Lagos administration was merged with a similar organization in Sierra Leone, and Lagos had become subordinate to Sierra Leone. Then in 1874, the Lagos Town Improvement Ordinance was then transferred to the Gold Coast in Accra, Ghana, which meant Lagos was now subordinate to the Gold Coast. The Lagos native elites weren't happy about this and lobbied intensively to have autonomy restored, but it wouldn't happen until 1886. In 1874, leaders of the Methodist community, including Charles Joseph George, who despite his name sounding very white, was an African, and a member of the Legislative Council, met to discuss the founding of a secondary school for members of their communion, and in June of 1877, the Methodist Boys' School building was opened. George was also one of those that laid the foundation stone for Wesley Church at Olowogbowo in the west of Lagos Island on the 17th of June 1881. By 1876, Lagos imports were valued at £476,813, and the exports were valued at £619,260. However, by the next year, in 1877, a trade war between Ibadan and both Abeokuta and Ijebu broke out, signaling the beginning of the Yoruba Wars, aka the Ekiti Paparo Wars. This is the war I mentioned in a previous episode where there was a widespread use of guns. By 1878, Ekiti and Ijesha had also revolted against Ibadan's rule and joined Abeokuta in the fights. The fighting was parodic and lasted 16 years. Ekiti had the advantage because of the rifles they had already purchased from Lagos Saro merchants. Lagos was instructed by Accra, which is obviously the subordinate to Accra at this point, to stay out of the conflict, despite the harm it was doing to trade. The Fulani and other Saro merchants also tried to mediate, but they were rejected. And I think we're going to pause it there for this episode. So just a recap of what we talked about in this episode. In this episode, we talked about how Lagos was run after it became a colony. Then we talked about what happened in the southeast with Jaja and him creating Opobo and becoming like the head of that place. We also briefly touched on the beginning of the Yoruba Wars. That's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. My name is Dr. Catel, and I'm out. One more thing before I go, I just want to point out that you guys can support us by joining our Patreon community at www.patreon.com/RonuCreative. So go there and support us, and we'll much appreciate it. Thank you very much. Much love.